on nothing. It is his first lecture here at the TSS. So I encourage everyone to be very gentle, very kind, and very supportive of Luis. And in order to get that support going, I've asked his wife Mariana to actually do the reading for us, which will be followed by Sandra with the initial prayer. We'll come back at the end with some announcements and more information. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to read a passage of our daily bread. Let's get to work. What then shall we say, brothers? When you come together, everyone has a hymn, or a word of instruction, a revelation, a tongue, or an interpretation. All of these must be done for the strengthening of the church. Paul, Corinthians. The church of Corinth was struggling with certain strenuous difficulties when Paul wrote the observation transcribed herein. The contents of the letter noted diverse spiritual problems experienced by the Peloponnesian companions. However, we can isolate the verse and apply it to various situations experienced by Christian groups formed in a Spiritist environment in the revival of the teachings of the gospel. We usually notice intense preoccupation on the part of the workers for news regarding phenomena in Revelation. Some nucleuses simply halt their activities when they do not have experienced mediums. Why? No medium can resolve permanently the fundamental problems of the illumination of companions. Our spiritual task would be absurd if we were solely circumscribed to the mechanical frequency of many people to any Spiritist center simply to observe the efforts of a few. May the disciples be convinced that the tasks and the realization belong to all and that it is indispensable for each one to work within the area of edification to which they are assigned. No one can allege an absence of new information when voluminous concessions from the superior sphere await the firm decision of the apprentice of good will regarding the understanding of life and the need for improvement. When you meet, remember the doctrine and the revelation, your ability to speak and to interpret, which you already possess, and set to work of goodness and enlightenment in the indispensable improvement.
So I ask you to close your eyes and elevate our thoughts to God, our Creator, to Jesus, our Master of Love, our guiding light, to bless us in this beautiful Sunday morning, that we are about to hear the words of Paul the apostle of Christ. May his word and his work open in our hearts, in our souls, the awakening for our spirit to walk in this new light, in this path that will bring us closer to him. And in this, we say thank you, and so be it. Luis Paulo.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
That's a good one. I like that.
I hope it will be gentle.
Yes, I like that. First of all, welcome everybody for being here. I know that the weather's awesome outside, but I promise that you're not gonna regret being here. You're gonna have a good lecture. I hope so. This is my first time, so let's try. So, as Joe said, today we're talking about Paul of Tarsus, right? And more specifically, chapter 13, from the first epistle to the Corinthians, right? So I'll start giving a quick intro about Paul of Tarsus, and then I'll go moving on to the actual, I call it a poem, this chapter 13. Some other people call other things, but I really like that. That's why I'm presenting that. So let's move on. So the birth name of Paul of Tarsus was Saul of Tarsus. So he was born in Tarsus, of course, and that was the capital city in the Roman province of Cilicia, right? He was a Jew and Roman citizen. His Roman citizenship he inherited from his father, and that was good for him because he was able to advance in his ministry to both Jewish and Roman audience. And he was a Pharisee, and he was one of the most ardent Christian persecutors as a Pharisee. So that was really interesting because from one side, he completely moved to the other side once he converted to Christianity. So first, he changed his name. So he started being called as Paul of Tarsus, or Saint Paul nowadays. And if you look at the name, Paul is a Latin name, so you can notice the influence of the Roman to his name and to himself. So he converted to Christianity between 33 and 36 after that, and he founded several churches in Asia Minor and Europe. So he did a lot of work, and he, from one side, like from persecuting Christians, he was one of the most prominent, or the Christian that did a lot of job to spread the words. And he was considered one of the most important figures of the apostolic age. That's what I said, like it was really important. And wrote several epistles. Some people say that he wrote 14 epistles, but as far as we know, we are able to see 13 of them in the New Testament books. So let's say that, let's stick to this number 13 for now. So moving on. So right now I'm going to start talking about the first epistle to the Corinthians, chapter 13. In this part, I'm going to just tell you a briefing what's going to be talked about, just to give you a good idea and a better understanding for the next verse, because I will go verse by verse. So this chapter covers the love that Christians should have towards others or towards everyone. If you look at this chapter, there are some translations, instead of using charity, which is the word down there, which means agape in Greek, it's a well-known agape, and which means unconditional love. But there are some translators that put, instead of charity, put love. And I thought charity would be a better fit for this chapter, because it closes all the meanings that we have to understand it, right? Like, so it becomes more clear, in my opinion. So, by the way, as we're talking about charity, what is charity? According to the question 886 from the Spiritist book, that's the question that Kardec asked to the spirits. What is the true meaning of the word charity as employed by Jesus? And the answer was benevolence for everyone, indulgence for the imperfections of others, and forgiveness of injuries or trespasses, depends on the translation. So if you look at that answer, for me it's a complete answer because it covers three virtues, three like really good virtues: benevolence, indulgence, and forgiveness. That covers all the aspects of the charity of and doing good to others. So we're gonna go that in the detail. This is also known as BIF, which is benevolence, indulgence, and forgiveness, or better memorizing. So let's move it on. Okay. Benevolence for everyone. What does that mean? It means desire to do good to everyone, including ourselves. Look at that. I've never thought about that before. everyone means others and ourselves. But why ourselves? The question is, let's say that I'm not doing good to myself. In other words, I'm not looking to myself, I'm not looking at my limitations, I'm not looking at my evils and my bad behaviors. So how come if I don't look at myself, how come I'm gonna do good to others? You can try it, but it's gonna be more difficult, right? And at the same time, chances are that we're gonna fail, sorry. So that's why it is important as well to look at yourself, right? It's that simple. It sounds it is, but it is not. And I tell you why. Because once I start looking at myself, first of all, I start looking at my vices, my bad behaviors, my bad thoughts, and the list start, piling up. And I said, oh my God, that's a lot of work, but that's a good thing. I think that's the main purpose that we are here. We are here to evolve and contribute to the evolution to others, right? So in order to do that, to evolve, we have to look at our inner self and do our inner transformation to start this work. Is it? As I said, it's not easy work, but it is worthwhile because we're gonna learn and we're gonna improve ourselves, and that's the main key to start doing good to others because you're gonna respect yourself, right? You're gonna know your limits, so you're gonna always moving on the flow, right? So that was a really important saying. And the second one, indulgence for the imperfections of others. So having perfection for others with regards to their limitation without requiring for them a level of perfection that we do not have. We don't have that, right? So, and that happens with me all the times because sometimes I think I know everything. So, and I start saying things to others. But you know what? First of all, if I look at myself, maybe I have the same limitations as the other ones, or a limitation that I did in the past and I was able to change it, right? So if I have benevolence for everyone, in other words, I will respect everyone, I will do good to everyone, including to myself. I know exactly what I did in the past or what I have to do now. So that being said, I will be able to understand others and see that, you know what, everybody's on the same boat. We have to learn. We are here together and we have to learn together, right? So having benevolence for everyone, the consequence for that is having the indulgence for everyone because you're going to have compassion towards others. Because we already did our work in the first one, right? We already did this, whatever I explained right now. And the third one, forgiveness of injuries. And that's a consequence of the benevolence and the indulgence. So, in other words, being benevolent and indulgent lead us to tolerance towards others. So that's a consequence of benevolence and indulgence because if you're good to everyone and you have compassion to others, forgiveness is just a result of that. So if we follow those, if we really practice charity, it is a win-win situation because you're going to improve yourself and at the same time you're already doing two commandments, Christian commandments, right? Because if you do good to others, like to everyone, including ourselves, you are already loving your neighbor as yourself, right? And that's really deep. That's the first. That's a commandment that covers everything else. So with that, by understanding ourselves, removing our vice, we're gonna start loving ourselves, and that's the first path to love others, right? So and do unto others as you would have them do to you as is a consequence of the first one, because you're already doing good because I love myself, I love the others. I'm practicing charity on the real meaning of the word. So that's a win-win situation. So that being said, as we have now a good idea what's going to be um, presented here, I will go through each verse of this poem, let's say, from chapter 13. So let's start with the verse 1, right? Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but have not charity, I have become sounding brass or a clanging cymbal. I must confess, once I look at that, I said, okay, what does that mean? Like, the tongue of man, angels, clanging cymbal. So let's look at that in detail. And once I start doing that, doing this exercise, things start clarifying, right? So moving on. So tongues of man, what does that mean? Those are verbally expressed or written, as I'm doing right now. I'm talking to everybody. You can read my slide, it's written over there. But they're transient. In other words, not permanent. The example of that is for Latin language, right? Latin was well spoken during Roman Empire, and nowadays is a dead language, right? In other words, people kind of practice, but the language is not a live language. It's not changing all the time. It's not. It is like it stop at a certain point of time, and then stay there, right? And tongues of angels. Those are languages expressed through their thoughts with love, right? And they're permanent. Why? Because it used to be like that in the past. Like even if you have intuition or other people that mediums that could receive messages or even visualize them, those are expressed through thoughts. There's no language barrier. Depends on the medium. Sometimes like the conversion is not that straightforward, but that's the language used by them, and that's always permanent. That's always permanent because it used to be like that. It is like that right now, and it will be in the future, right? Because it's quite not generic, but quite easy for them to express themselves. So, as Paul said, if I speak with tongues of men and tongues of angels, without charity, I'm just a sounding brass or clanging cymbal. That means, well, sounding brass and clanging cymbal just make noise, right? In other words, if I'm expressing myself, telling the others, like, or helping others without practicing charity, without unconditional love, there's a condition over there, right? Mm-hmm. So in other words, I'm just doing that for myself. Why? Because we just want to catch somebody's attention, right? And they're like, sometimes I catch myself thinking, oh my God, I have to do charity, otherwise I'll go to Umbral, right? Which is, for those who don't know that, Umbral is a place in which all the spirits, once they disincarnate, they have to clear themselves, and it's not it's not a funny place to be, according to what I was reading before. So that's not charity. If I think like that, it's not charity, because I'm more concerned about the Umbral than doing charity itself, right? So there's a condition over there. So I have to think about the transformation of charity, the whole process of charity, and not going to Umbral is just a consequence what we are doing, right? So we don't need to, look at the consequence and give the value for that, right? And there are other people that let's say, like, once we start doing charity, we want to be noticed. That's not charity as well, because we're more concerned about our ego, right? We are more concerned about catching everyone's attention to feed our ego, to proud about ourselves, and some people to profit with that, right? There are people that do that. So that's not a true unconditional love, because there is uh, how can I say? There's intention towards that. The intention is to feed my ego, right? Okay, next. So, and talking about that, making noise and doing charity, but being more concerned of making noise than doing actual charity. That's so important that Kardec he wrote a whole chapter, chapter 13. So, but that's not from the first epistle. That's for the Gospel according to Spiritism. That's just a coincidence, right? Chapter 13, which is entitled "Do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing." And the idea is that, like, if you're doing charity with your right hand, and if you are really focused on doing good, the left hand will not know it. Because your concern is not to spread that, not to say to others that, oh, I'm doing charity, see, I'm a good person. No, it's the charity per se, right? So that's a really good chapter. I really recommend everybody to read that. So let's go to verse 2. And though I have the gift of prophecy, and understand all mysteries, and all knowledge, and though I have all faith, so that I could remove mountains, but have not charity, I am nothing. That's really interesting, right? You see many figures there, many strong words. So let's see what that means. So, having the gift of prophecy. Prophecy in this sense, meaning that's a mediumistic ability that some people does have, and they use that to transmit the teachings from the spirits, right? And but if people start doing that without the real meaning of charity, without unconditional love, then things will be changed because the purpose it's the other one. So there is a purpose. So there is not charity anymore. So those people start being charlatans, becoming charlatans, because they will not act or use that gift for love anymore or for charity, but for their own gains, right? And usually once that happens, the good spirits stop, transmitting those messages, and probably other spirits not so evolved start communicating, and sometimes as those people already gain popularity, they will continue doing that work for their own benefits, but they choose their path, so they have that right to do so. Understanding all mysteries and all knowledge. That's a really, really interesting thing. Imagine, we are on a planet, a tiny one, in comparison to a universe that we are not even capable to measure it, right? So how come we're gonna know all the mysteries and have all the knowledge, be in a position like that? It's pretty hard, right? I know that science is doing a good job, like making new discoveries, and throughout any kind of science, technology, biology, you name it. However, comparing that knowledge that we have today to the whole universe that we have is just a chimera. It's so small that we're not capable to cover everything. But let's say that we have all the understanding. Let's consider that, as Paul said, if we have all the understanding of mystery, all mysteries and all knowledge, but without charity, what's gonna happen? The science without charity is mainly profit. So it's gonna benefit few people at the cost of others. And that's sometimes dangerous because that can go against the humankind, right? Whatever invention that we do, that we're not thinking about the others, just about myself. You're not following the right path of development, right? With the moral, so science with moral. We are just following our own, ego and doing what I want. That can be dangerous. You can see that through the wars, for example. Most people start developing several technologies to be used against humankind, and that's an interesting topic. For example, if we observe like the level of development of technology and development of morality, you can see like that the technology goes at a way higher pace than morality, right? And that and sometimes I notice that once this difference is too big, something happens. People start saying, "Hey, you know what? I'm tired of that. We need to change it because people are suffering, other problems are being caused, like the environment has lots of issues right now. So let's make a change." Then the morality step up a little bit, but the technology goes on again, right? So that's what we observe. And that reminds me, Albert Einstein, science without religion is lame, and religion without science is blind. In this case, I would say science without religion that practice charity, right? Because as I as I love, I as I am benevolent, as I have unconditional love towards others, as I have forgiveness, and as I respect everyone, I will not practice charity to my own gain. I'll do that to the good of the humankind, right? And religion without science is blind. Yes, think about it. Okay, I pray to God, that's a good thing because you start tuning yourself in a more elevated sphere, realm, and you calm down. But did you change yourself if you don't practice charity? No, because you're not going to look at yourself, right? You're not going to work your vices and do that. So religion without science, in this case, religion without charity and without science is blind. For me, it turns to be too much dogmatic. So we cannot question anything. So we're not going to learn anything. So if you're not learning, that's not you're not going to change with that, right? Even though having all faith so that I could remove mountains but have not charity, I am nothing. By the way, remove mountains is not what is represented over there, right? It's just a picture that I put there, all right? And the real meaning of that is removing mountains is removing our mountains. In other words, our vices, our bad behaviors, our bad thoughts. We have to remove that. Is that easy? Well, it's not easy, but it is worth it. It is worth it to do it because you're gonna feel, lighter, and you're gonna go on your flow, and that's a good exercise that we have to do. And we should have faith guided by charity towards others and ourselves to be able to connect with God. That's important. In other words, true faith is a result of confidence in God, in us, and in our life. What is that? Our life is a way for us to make the change. We are here to learn with whatever happens with us. So that's why we have to value that. Value this opportunity because we are here to learn. We may feel pain. That's part of the path. But suffering is optional. Each one will look at that, at this pain, and supposed to learn it, right? It will become easier once you do that. That is only possible through charity, as we saw before. That's another intriguing verse. And though I distribute all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, but have not charity, it profits me nothing. The meaning of profits in this sentence doesn't mean material things, but all our own gains, personal gains, right? That I really I look at that. So how come I'm giving food to people? Isn't that a good thing? It is in a sense in which they have their needs, the real needs. That's why it is important for us to observe that and see, hey, you know what? We are living in a material world, and they're feeling hungry, so they need food. Okay, but is that enough? No. Why not? Because the mere distribution of material goods does not change the human being, like their behavior, their thoughts, or give them hope, right? In other words, trying to change the moral of anybody else, like by just giving stuff, you're not going to change, first of all, but trying to change their moral miseries, let's say that, by giving just material things, it will not happen, because they will stay the same, and they will continue in their material miseries because of that, right? So that's really profound. Charity suffers long and is kind. Charity does not envy. Charity does not parade itself. In other words, charity acts with prudency. Is not puffed up. Does not behave rudely. Does not seek its own interests. Is not provoked. Thinks no evil. That's a long one, but let's look at that. Charity suffers long and is kind. So charity suffers long because it is patient, right? So in other words, we have our own pace to do things. So if we look at that, we understand our limitations, and we are going always on the middle way. In other words, in our own flow, not pushing us too hard, not doing nothing. And how do you know that? You're either gonna start exasperate if you're pushing too hard, or your conscience will tell you, hey, you know what? You have to do something, right? So only those who are working towards their inner transformation, seeking to pacify themselves, would be capable of pacifying the external world. So in other words, if we look at ourselves, seek our inner transformation, and in other words, if I look at myself, try to change my vices and my bad behaviors, I will understand myself, I will go through my path on my pace and say, hey, I'm in peace now, because I know that what I'm doing, it is correct, it is the right path, at the pace that I'm able to, right? And and you start becoming calm. You're gonna start becoming able to do toward others the same thing, right? Charity is kind because it is benevolent. Those who cultivate it perform the good to the utmost of their abilities. And there's a question, 642 from the Spirit's book, that's about that. It is saying there that once we are doing charity, you can achieve a certain level that it becomes a norm for you, right? And doing that, you're evolving. The more you evolve, the more you learn, and so on. That's a good cycle for ourselves, right? Once we achieve certain level, we are gonna be doing good at the utmost of our capabilities, utmost of our possibilities, right? Charity does not envy. Why? Because envy is an egoic feeling, right? It's from the ego. And charity is unconditional love. So it doesn't match, right? Charity does not parade itself. In other words, charity acts with prudency. Why? Because once you practice charity, you have to do that same exercise of looking at yourself, paying attention to yourself. That means that you need to be aware what's going on, what you're doing, and what you need to do. So it is always looking with prudency because we're always thinking about that, right? It's not puffed up. As I said, puffed up is another ego feeling, and or expression, sorry. And if you act like that, you have a condition to do love, then it's not charity anymore. So that means charity is humble, because we are always focused on change, not the results, not to spread the news, not to, be proud of that. No, just to do our work. Charity does not behave rudely. I know that nowadays it's pretty hard, even for ourselves, because we, in our day-by-day lives, we always facing lots of bumps and lots of things. And we ended up, in my case, like, I ended up sometimes being exasperate or acting rudely. But what I have to do is look at myself, respect myself, understand my limits, and respect others, respect their behaviors, respect their free will, right? Even if I have a good intention and try to tell them something that would be good for them, if they choose to not do so, it's their free will. I have to respect their rights to do it because they're still in their evolution and we are still in ours, but we are all on the same pace. That's why we are all on the same planet, right? So that's what he's saying with about charity respects everyone's free will. Charity does not seek its own interests. As I said before, if there's any interest, it's not unconditional anymore. So it's not unconditional love. So charity has no interest, right? And that's another thing that once I was reading Kardec, that's the Gospel according to Spiritism, chapter 15. It says, without charity, there is no salvation. I must confess that once I was reading that, during that time, before studying this, I was more concerned about the salvation itself than the charity. But that's not the case. That doesn't supposed to be like that. Because I have to look at the inner transformation and contribute to the evolution, to the world, right? So it's more important to focus on the charity itself, not at the result, at salvation. So that's why I put this sentence there, this phrase. Charity is not provoked, is not exasperated. That's something that we usually do once we are pushing our limits. Even if we do like charity or try to do in this case, if we push our limits, in my case, I start becoming exasperated and cranky, angry, and that's not the case because I miss the real path of charity because charity has to be gentle. I'll give an example. Let's say that my year-end goal is to be like Jesus, right? That's easy, right? No? Yeah, of course not. And I'll tell you why. Let's think on this way. Imagine that planet Earth is 4.5 billion years old, right? In other words, 4.5 billion years ago, Jesus was here in the celestial realm level, already working on that. So that being said, that oh my God, so I have 4.5 billion plus the time that I have to be in the celestial world. So yeah, it's a long time. Yeah, but we have to be gentle. If I put this goal to be like that, I know that I'm not gonna make it, right? So yeah, the good thing there's a error on a, not error in a calculation, but a margin of error of 1%, so we can save around 45 million years. So that's good enough. But but I forgot to include the difference between our level and celestial one. I hope it's not 45 million years. Right.
It's a little bit more.
Yeah, a little bit more. So that's why Cherry has to be gentle, otherwise we're gonna get exasperated, right? Cherry thinks no evil. So why is that? Because evil is a bad feeling, right? And charity is unconditional love, right? So charity is good by excellence. So doesn't match. Charity does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoice in the truth. Iniquity occurs once we deviate from the kingdom of God. Jesus said, "Seek the kingdom of God and His justice, and everything else will be added in." What kind of justice is that? It's justice of love, right? If you seek the kingdom of God and His justice of love, we are gonna be reaching the real truth. That's why the truth and charity always go hand in hand. Because charity is the path. We don't have the truth right now, just have perceptions of the truth. But we know that by doing charity, we're gonna be there for sure. Verse 7. Charity bears all things, believes all things, hope all things, endure all things. So charity is long. Once you practice charity is a long path. It is worth it. There will be some bumps. You have to endure things, but it is worth it. So Paul's trying to say that is saying that the development of the true faith to endure any ordeal as a testimony of our love for the gospel of Jesus, who invites us to process of inner transformation through several incarnations, turning it into learning experience. As I mentioned before, we are all here learning. We have to respect ourselves and others because everybody's learning.
Mm-hmm.
Any kind of pain, any kind of things that happen, right? And when we do so, believing that only the sincere ideals of love transform us into better persons, we are truly practicing charity. That's really good. Charity never fails, but whether there are prophecies, they will fail. Whether there are tongues, they will cease. Whether there is knowledge, it will vanish away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. As I mentioned before, we don't know everything. It's hard because we are a tiny little person in a small planet in comparison to the universe that we cannot even measure, right? So it's pretty hard because we don't have the perceptions yet. We don't have knowledge. Even if somebody tried to tell us, we will not understand. We're just like a, I don't know, 1 or 2 year old kid trying to learn quantum physics. So it's hard. We don't have even words to understand things yet. So that's why we do not know all the truth. All we know is just perceptions of the truth. But what we know, and we can reach there, is that all we know is that charity is the path to the truth. Because it's love by itself, unconditional love, benevolence, indulgence, and forgiveness. But when that which is perfect has come, then that which is part will be done away. Look at that. Wow, that's kind of complicated. So I interpret on this way. But when that which is perfect has come, once we achieve the celestial stage, perfection has come. I would say that that's a relative perfection, because the only being that's perfect is God, right? God is the only perfect. Why do I know that there's only God that's perfect? Because otherwise there would be multiple gods, right? At the same time. And as we know that there is only one, which is a supreme intelligence, the primary cause of everything, and God does that for love. So we know that they're perfect because to what we observe as well, right? But how do we get there? Probably, according to my calculation, 50 million years, right? Something like that. No, not that. I don't know the real the numbers, right? But we know that the path. We know that by practicing charity through several incarnations until we get near to perfection. That's why we mentioned near to perfection, because we're not gods, right? When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. Initially, it was really hard for me to understand that, but I just changed the word child to ignorance, but ignorance in the sense of lack of knowledge, right? And things start become clear for me. When I was an ignorant, I spoke as an ignorant. I understood as an ignorant. I thought as an ignorant. Yeah, that's me. But one I didn't became yet, but I will be sometime. I hope soon.
Not so ignorant.
Yeah, not so. I put away my ignorant things. So, oh no, it's clear. And that's me, unfortunately. Well, I'm practicing that. And of course, man is a symbol of the understanding of truth. So once we reach that level, we are gonna be able to see and understand everything, right? There's a little chart there. Is it a right to remain ignorant? I don't know, but I refuse to find it out. This guy's not practicing charity. He doesn't want to change himself. For now we see in a mirror, dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know, just as I also am known. Wow, look at that. So, we see in a mirror, well, we just have perception of things. We're still just a child, so we don't know everything. So, we only know the perception of the truth, nothing more, right? But once we look at ourselves and start developing our virtues, which is in our real sense, this real sense is inside everybody. The only difference is that we have our vices, our bad behaviors, our bad thoughts that we chose. And that shadows our real sense, right? So once we work on that and start removing those shadows, we will be showing our real sense. So whose I shall know as I also am known. By whom? By God. God knows already our real sense. That's why we have the opportunity around us to experience, learn it, and work on it to advance ourselves. That's really good. So our real sense will become visible after this exercise.
You have to remember that back then, 2,000 years ago, mirrors were very bad. They were
okay.
not as good as they are today.
Oh, okay.
So when
Can you
people were
imagine?
looking in the mirrors, they only saw a distorted image as well of themselves.
it.
It was not fully clear,
That's right.
right? So they're saying it's a reflection but it's a bad reflection of us.
Got it. So yeah, didn't know that.
Good.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a good thought. Because there's a dual meaning there. You can even have a perception what you're seeing, but at the same time you're doing who you really are, right? Sometimes your bad behaviors and all that stuff.
And also, I see. Sorry,
No worries.
I shouldn't be saying.
No, you can go ahead.
I also see in that part that we are so imperfect that sometimes we
Yes.
only see our imperfections when we look at us, as you
True.
said in the beginning.
That's right. Yes.
And God not only see us as we are, our imperfections,
True.
but He sees the whole potential that we will be one day.
That's right.
So that's why I shall know just as I also am known, because
That's
God
right.
knows all our perfections, beings that we will be one day.
That's right. Our real essence.
Exactly.
Right. That's very good. I like it. Thank you.
Mhm.
In verse 13, that's the last verse. And now abide faith, hope, charity. These three, but the greatest of these is charity. Look at that. Like, Paul is putting charity greater than faith and hope. Why? Because charity is the compass that guides our hope and faith. So it is our path, right? It is our tool for our inner transformation. So if you look at faith without charity, what is that gonna happen? You're just gonna pray to God, which is good. As I said, you're gonna tune, you're gonna be connect to elevated thoughts, but you're not gonna be changing, right? If I have hope without charity, that could guide us to the wrong path, right? Because I don't have unconditional love, and that will not give me the right path to use my hope to move myself, right? And that's also said in the Gospel according to Spiritism, chapter 15, item 7. That's a comment from Kardec about this last sentence. And now abide faith, hope, charity, these three, but the greatest of these is charity. It says, like, in this manner, and without any possible doubt, Paul placed charity above even faith. This is because charity is within the reach of everybody, from the ignorant, myself, to the wise person, from rich to poor people. It is also quite independent of any particular beliefs. He does even more. He defines true charity by showing it as being not only beneficence, but also a collective of all qualities of the heart, in terms of goodness and benevolence towards all of our fellow beings. So complete. Yeah, look at that. It's brilliant. This description is brilliant. And I'm glad that Kardec gave us his thoughts towards that to clarify even more what we need to do. Oops. Stop working. Okay. Thanks, everyone. If you want to know more about Paul of Tarsus, I follow this book from Dr. Alirio. This is a great book, by the way. Unfortunately, there's only a Portuguese version. There's other books from Alirio. I really recommend reading that. And I also follow the Spirits book from Allan Kardec. That one have English version. That's good. And Gospel according to Spiritism as well. So those were the books that I followed to prepare this presentation. Any questions?
Well done, Luis.
Thank you, sir.
Very well done.
Stay
here.
there.
You have to stay here.
Okay.
Mariana, you have the first question. I'm sure you were
No, I
just raising your hands. Questions, comments? It is a beautiful passage in the New Testament,
Yes.
this
It's
this
one
letter.
of my favorite.
It is so complex, so difficult, and we also have to understand always the context in which it was written and spoken. That's why I brought up the point about the mirror, because yes, it is still true today in its deepest philosophical and spiritual meaning, but at the time it was spoken, it had to make sense to those he was speaking to as well, more importantly, because he wanted to establish Christianism as religion. And Paul needed to do this in a very objective way. Paul was desperate, man. Not desperate because he was in anguish, he was desperate because he was in a hurry. He truly believed that Jesus would be coming back in his own lifetime to take with him those who had followed Jesus' lessons and were prepared to take on the actness of good and charity. So he needed to be very to the point, very specific. And even more incredible is that because he believed that, he wasn't really thinking of a evolutionary path based on reincarnation. Because he thought Jesus was coming and that was it, that's going to be the final judgment at the time. But everything he said makes complete and total more sense if we put it in the context of the many lives that we've had and we still need to follow ahead. Because charity is not in a hurry.
No.
But it needs to be persistent. It needs to be constant in our lives. That's how this transformation to habit that Louise mentioned takes place inside our hearts. That's how we do charity and love without having to think about it, without having to wait for the benefits that it might bring to us.
I also think that we are still so imperfect because charity is love in action, right?
Yes.
So for me, what brings is that we are still so imperfect that we need to do the action to be able to remember that essence of love that we all have. It's not to learn, it's just to remind ourselves. Because when we do that, when we do charity with all the words that Paul is explaining to us, there is this beautiful feeling that just embraces our whole body and soul, and we feel so good that we want to do more. But in the beginning, we have to do as, practicing and becomes a habit, because that's where we are in our evolutionary path. So habits are very difficult for us to break, but it's very good once we break them and we put a new habit in place. So I think when we start doing charity, it's a reminder of who we really are as spirits.
That's very true, because we're gonna first change ourselves, things will start making sense, and we're gonna do that in our pace. So once we really know that the path to follow is always good, so that's why we have to see that.
So even if in the beginning it's not as Paul is trying to tell us the way it is, it's okay, because in the beginning can be automatic, but then when you start doing and becomes a habit, then you're gonna see the good feeling that action brings to you, because it is love.
It is.
I agree.
And then there's the whole issue of charity without love, right? How is that possible? Well, remember that love is something that we have and that we feel. Charity is something that we practice and that we do. As Sandra said, it's love
In
in action.
In action.
But that only occurs while we're incarnated. There's a difference between what we're thinking and what we're doing. Once discarnated, there is no difference. What we think and what we feel is what we do. Because it is through our thoughts and our feelings that we execute things in the spiritual world. So if we are doing things like the bell that just rings because somebody tells it needs to ring, we don't have our love driving that. And once we discarnate, what's going to happen? The true feelings that we had, that we were trying to hide with actions that did not reflect our feelings, these are the ones that are going to come across. And we're going to be exposed. And we're going to suffer for that. Listen.
When he talking about science without religion and religion without science, I remember that Emmanuel said, we need to involve in morality and knowledge.
Yes.
Exactly. Also
The two
describes
wings.
the two wings, a bird with two wings, right? Can't fly very high if one of them is not working just like the other.
We have a question from Dona Maria Inês from Brazil. She want to know how Luis is feeling about your first lecture about this theme, so important and beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Fan club. How about that?
Yeah, that's good. I like that. To answer that.
This is the mother.
I know.
It's a valid question.
It
How do you
is.
feel it?
Very
It
valid
is, yes.
question.
I cannot hide myself and say that I'm not anxious. I'm really anxious, but at the same time, it is rewarding to be here and share with you whatever I read here and learn it. So I have those both feelings right now at this moment.
And you know what, Luis? What you did today is charity. You were practicing the love of sharing
Sure.
the knowledge with us. You know, all this long homework that you did. For me, I saw some of the things in a different light. So for that, I am thankful. So it's a really beautiful charity that you are doing. So you are doing charity.
Thank
Today.
you.
And he had the tough job to close the month. Today was the last lecture of
Yes.
all, and you did a very good job.
Thank you.
So it's a good segue that Alessandra mentioned, is that starting next month, we're going to do a series of monthly themes around Emmanuel. We have a couple of series. We have a particular series of books. I'm not sure if all of them are translated, but
No,
that's
none
why
of
we
them.
that's why we decided to bring them forth. So from August all the way to December, we're going to be bringing the best of Emmanuel, where he talks a lot, many of these very same subjects, but from a slightly different prism. So I invite you all to continue coming here. And next month we begin with Emmanuel's point of view as he comments many of the things that we find in the Spirit's book.
Yeah, so just say who Emmanuel is.
True. Emmanuel was he is
He
a
is.
very high spirit and the mentor of Chico Xavier,
There you go.
right? So he was the main author of the most number of books that Chico wrote, and has become kind of a staple in all Spiritist teaching and learning, that you really need to go through many, if not all of these books that he wrote, which brings forth a lot more information that was just originally brought forth by the 5 Kardecian books. Okay, so we're going to invite our quiet kids to come over, and let's prepare ourselves for the Mass.
Eu tô. Ok.